You are not ready for this. You think you've seen HOA power trips? Think again. This is the story of how an innocent hobby, a simple home garage workshop, became the target of a jealous, obsessive HOA board member we're calling Patty the Permit Karen. Patty didn't just try to fine our homeowner, Alex. She tried to have his entire livelihood condemned. But when Alex finally brought the literal chief building permit officer from the county right to her front door, the resulting devastating legal fallout didn't just strip Patty of her title. It dissolved the entire HOA board, cost Patty her house, and resulted in the biggest, most satisfying legal victory we have ever covered. Lock in, because this is the HOA smackdown of the century. Before we dive into the legal warfare and the pure, unadulterated justice served, you know the drill. Smash that like button until your thumb hurts. Subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell to join the biggest anti-HOA army on the internet. Every single like sends a message to every petty Karen that their reign of terror is over. Now, let's get this drama rolling. Alex had moved into the Willow Creek development exactly 3 years before the nightmare began. Quiet, unassuming mechanical engineer by trade, Alex's passion was custom high-end restoration work, specifically vintage motorcycle engines. His 2-car garage, meticulously organized, was his sanctuary. It was insulated, soundproofed, with professional acoustic panels, and always cleaner than Patty the Permit Karen's kitchen. The noise was minimal. He rarely ran loud machinery past 6 p.m., and his neighbors, genuinely decent people, loved seeing his projects, often waving or stopping for a friendly chat. His operation was small, strictly a hobby, occasionally selling a restored engine, but never crossing the threshold into a full-scale commercial business. Alex had done his due diligence, checked the community's CC and RS covenants, conditions, and restrictions, confirmed his county zoning for residential home offices and hobbies, and even consulted a real estate attorney just to be safe. He was clean, he was compliant, but compliance doesn't matter when you run afoul of a person who believes she is the law. Enter Patty Peterson, or as she preferred, Mrs. Peterson, HOA Architectural Review Chair. Patty was one of those people who felt the need to micromanage existence itself. Her house was aggressively beige, her yard was surgically manicured, and her favorite pastime was observing. She was the neighborhood panopticon, peering through her plantation shutters, waiting for a misplaced trash can or a blade of grass $1.08 an inch too long. Alex had initially received a minor, utterly absurd violation notice: unapproved window treatment in the garage. The window treatment, simple, opaque privacy film to prevent people from staring into his workspace. Alex politely submitted the film specifications and a photo, citing the CC&R's Section 3.4b, which permitted non-reflective, opaque privacy films. The violation was dismissed, but Patty's irritation was just beginning. She had been thwarted, and Patty did not tolerate being thwarted. The skirmish escalated when Alex took his perfectly restored 1968 Triumph Bonneville out for a test run. The sound, a glorious, rich, deep rumble, echoed briefly down the quiet street. Patty, watering her petunias with surgical precision, stared daggers. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived. Subject: cease and desist, order unauthorized commercial, operation, and excessive noise. The audacity of the second letter was a tectonic shift. Patty had gone from petty tyrant to active legal aggressor. Alex felt the cold dread of a legally motivated attack. The 7-day ultimatum was a clear overreach. The CC&RS provided for a 30-day cure period for most major violations, and nothing about removal of tools was ever mentioned. This wasn't about community standards. It was about Patty's pathological need for control. Alex's formal dispute was summarily rejected by the Architectural Review Committee, which, surprise, surprise, consisted of Patty, her equally rigid friend, and one silent, terrified neighbor. The decision read like a parody. The sound of internal combustion engine testing is aesthetically disruptive to the tranquil suburban ambience established by the Willow Creek HOA. The existence of specialized tools constitutes prima facie evidence of commercial intent, irrespective of revenue. This was pure nonsense. Alex knew he had to lawyer up. He hired a legal firm specializing in property disputes and HOA litigation, sinking his retirement savings into the initial retainer. His attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense veteran named Ms. Reyes, immediately fired off a scorching letter to the HOA, demanding they retract the removal order and threatening a suit for civil harassment and injunctive relief. Patty's response? Not a retraction, but an escalation so outrageous it bordered on criminal fraud. 3 weeks later, a laminated, official-looking notice was affixed to Alex's garage door. It wasn't from the HOA, it was from the County Planning and Zoning Division. It stated, "Stop work order and conditional use permit. Revocation, unauthorized commercial use and structural violations." It was stamped and signed. It was terrifyingly official. Alex's hand shook as he read the fine print. He was required to appear before the county board in 48 hours or face immediate inspection and potential condemnation of the illegal structure. He immediately sent a photo to Ms. Reyes, who replied with a single all-caps word, "Fraud." Ms. Reyes quickly called the county planning office. The office had no record of the notice, no pending violations against Alex's address, and had certainly not issued a stop work order. The stamp was a forgery, signature a fake, and the entire notice was a counterfeit document designed to induce panic and force Alex to shut down. Patty had somehow acquired or fabricated a document that mimicked an official county order, a felony-level offense. She had weaponized the local government's authority against him. Why? Because the original removal order was unenforceable. This forged notice, however, carried the threat of official county action. Alex felt a surge of cold, focused rage. He was no longer fighting a petty neighbor. He was fighting a criminal. Ms. Reyes immediately filed a police report for forgery and criminal harassment, naming Patty Peterson as the prime suspect. Simultaneously, she initiated the lawsuit, naming Patty personally, the HOA board members, and the management company. The suit was for defamation, civil harassment, infliction of emotional distress, and $500,000 in punitive damages. But Patty, intoxicated by her perceived power, wasn't done. The very next day, a contractor, a man Alex had never seen, arrived with a crew, pulling up in a truck with a faded logo. He walked up to Alex's front door and handed him a crumpled note. It was from Patty. The note stated that since Alex had failed to cure the violation of the stop work order, the one she fabricated, the HOA was exercising its right under CC and R 9.2, C, to self-remediate the violation. The contractor informed Alex, with a sheepish glance, that he had been hired to cut the main power line to the garage and padlock the service panel to prevent further unauthorized commercial activity. The contractor was clearly uncomfortable, knowing this was wrong, but Patty had prepaid him generously. Alex, stunned by the sheer brazen illegality, had only seconds. He lunged to stop the contractor, physically blocking the service panel. The contractor, following Patty's strict, documented instructions, called the police, claiming Alex was assaulting a worker. Alex found himself in a frantic losing battle. A legal homeowner against a petty criminal with too much money and zero morality. As the police sirens wailed in the distance, Patty stood across the street, watching the whole scene with a look of pure, satisfied vindication. The police arrived, and Alex knew that even though he was right, the confrontation was now a chaotic mess. He was powerless, physically restrained by the responding officers, while the contractor, under police observation, cut the power to his workshop, effectively shutting down his life. Alex was detained, though quickly released after Ms. Reyes arrived and produced the police report proving the stop work order was a forgery. The charge of assault evaporated, but the damage was done. His workshop was dark, his reputation was smeared, and the HOA by Patty was openly celebrating. But Patty had made two fatal, unforgivable mistakes: forging a government document and illegally cutting a utility. Ms. Reyes went into hyperdrive. She used the police report and the utility cut as Exhibit A in a motion for a temporary restraining order, TRO, which was granted within 24 hours. The TRO prevented Patty and the HOA from contacting Alex, setting foot on his property, or taking any further action until the court date. This gave Alex the breathing room he needed to launch his counterattack, and it was going to be biblical, instead of simply relying on the forgery charge. Alex and Ms. Reyes began a deeper investigation into Patty's professional conduct. Patty, it turned out, was a recently retired administrative assistant from the County Planning and Zoning Division. She had access, or at least recent access, to official stationery, stamps, and processes. More importantly, she knew exactly who issued the permits in Alex's neighborhood. Ms. Reyes contacted a senior official at the county planning office, a man named Mr. Harrison, and laid out the entire case. Presenting the forged document and the unauthorized utility cut, Mr. Harrison was, to put it mildly, incandescently furious. Forgery of a county document is a severe breach of public trust, and using official-looking seals to harass a resident was intolerable. Mr. Harrison revealed the crucial piece of information: Alex's garage, due to its size and separation from the main house, required a specific conditional use permit cup for a home-based hobby. Alex had applied for it 3 years ago, and it had been approved. Who approved it? Mr. Harrison himself, the chief building permit officer? And here was the kicker. The fake stop work order Patty posted had claimed the cup was revoked, but the real CUP had a clause: any attempt by a private entity, like an HOA, to interfere with a valid CUP without a court order constitutes an actionable tort against the permittee and critically voids the validity of the private entity's own regulations as they apply to the permittee's activity. Ate had inadvertently stepped into a legal bear trap. Alex and Ms. Reyes decided to forego the immediate legal filing for a more dramatic, visible, and utterly humiliating climax. They arranged a meeting with Mr. Harrison, not at Alex's house, but at Patty's house. Ms. Reyes, Miss Reyes, a county inspector, and Mr. Harrison, the chief building permit officer himself, pulled up to Patty's meticulously manicured curb. They were accompanied by 2 uniformed police officers to serve the warrant and prevent any interference. Patty came storming out, her face a mask of rage and entitlement. "You are violating the TRO. You are trespassing," she shrieked. Mr. Harrison stepped forward, holding the forged document. "Mrs. Peterson, I am Mr. Harrison, chief building permit officer for the county. This document is a fake. That is a felony. More importantly, I personally approved Mr. Alex's conditional use permit 3 years ago." Patty froze, her color draining to a sickly white. "Furthermore," Mr. Harrison continued, his voice ringing with official authority, "the county has been notified of your illegal actions, including the cutting of Mr. Alex's utility. As of this moment, I am personally initiating a formal, full-scale review of every single architectural and zoning violation in the entire Willow Creek HOA, beginning with your property, Mrs. Peterson." The tables had turned. The power shifted, and Patty the permit Karen was suddenly facing the full, terrifying power of the actual, legitimate government authority she had tried to impersonate. The scene was the definition of poetic justice. Patty, sputtering and defeated, was handed a court summons, a police summons, and a notice from Mr. Harrison's team. The notice informed her that she was under investigation for multiple serious architectural violations that the HOA, under her chairmanship, had either ignored or actively permitted on her own property. It turns out Patty's aggressively beige home was built with an unapproved foundation grade change. Her perfectly level deck exceeded the maximum permitted height without a secondary permit, and her expensive new shed, which she boasted about at every meeting, was illegally built without any permit and encroached into a utility easement. Every single violation she had obsessed over for others, she had committed herself on a far larger scale. The immediate fallout was swift and brutal. Within 48 hours, Patty resigned from the HOA board under threat of immediate removal and criminal prosecution for forgery. The rest of the board, terrified of being dragged into the lawsuit, hastily followed suit. The HOA, now rudderless and facing a massive punitive damages suit from Alex, was in utter chaos. The management company, eager to limit their liability, immediately settled with Alex, paying him the full cost of his legal fees, plus a $50,000 settlement for emotional distress. But the real sweet payback was local. Mr. Harrison's investigation, which Patty's initial forgery triggered, snowballed. The County Planning and Zoning Division found dozens of violations throughout the Willow Creek development, all of which had been willfully ignored by Patty's board to focus on trivialities. The long-term aftermath was the final, perfectly placed nail in Patty's coffin. The community, fed up with the fines and the scandal, voted overwhelmingly to dissolve the Willow Creek HOA. They converted the community areas into a nonprofit trust, and the restrictive, tyrannical CC&Rs were gone forever. Alex, now the neighborhood hero, found himself with a level of freedom he'd never expected. But the deepest cut of revenge was yet to come. Patty, unable to afford the massive remediation costs on her house, the criminal defense fees, and the $100,000 judgment to Alex, was finally forced to sell her home at a huge loss in an ASC's fire sale to a real estate investor. The day she moved out, Alex was outside. He wasn't gloating, but he was working. He was using a custom-built open-pipe engine, the loudest, most glorious piece of machinery he owned, to test its idle speed. The sound, a magnificent, window-rattling roar, echoed down the street as Patty's movers loaded her final, pathetic boxers. She stared at him from the back of her moving van, a broken, defeated woman, and Alex simply gave her a slow, satisfied nod. The secondary revenge? The real estate investor who bought Patty's house had a plan for the illegally built structure. He gutted the interior, tore down the illegal deck, and converted the property into a rental. And guess who he hired to renovate the garage into a legal, commercially viable space with soundproofing and ventilation? Alex. Alex got paid a premium to turn the house of the woman who tried to ruin his life into a better, legally compliant workspace than his own. It was a victory so complete, so multi-layered, that it became a legend. Alex's workshop didn't just survive, it thrived. His story became a rallying cry for homeowners everywhere. Patty, the permit Karen, was banished, her organization dissolved, her assets seized, and her home became a monument to her failure. This is what happens when you forge a government document and mess with a man's hobby. You get served with the cold, hard, unassailable truth of the law, right on your own porch.